Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. We have here today a very special guest. I'm excited to have him on the show. We get to kind of go down memory lane with some wrestling here. Please welcome to the show, Steve Goldstein. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, my friend.
Well, look here. We've had a couple phone conversations. And I think every time we get on the phone, we talk about an hour or hour plus going down memory lane on wrestling. Now, you actually have a pretty interesting path into being a wrestling historian because you started out script writing, which kind of led you into a script that we're going to talk about here today that chronicled a very tragic family in wrestling, the Von Erichs. But kind of tell us a little bit like when you grew up, was script writing your passion, and were you a fan of wrestling?
Well, yes and yes to both questions. How's that? I was a fan of wrestling. I remember turning on the TV, and I didn't know what it was at first. I didn't know if it was, I didn't know if it was like boxing or if it was a different kind of an animal. I grew up Bruno Sammartino, Gorilla Monsoon, and I used to watch it. My parents gave me a hard time about that. They didn't want me to put my sister in a headlock or anything or a flying drop kick. But I was always interested in writing. I was writing since I was a kid in elementary school. And then I won the first writing award at my high school. And I ended up at Brandeis up in Waltham, Massachusetts. And wrestling wasn't really a part of my life anymore for a long time. I transferred to USC Film School my junior year of script writing. And, I kept I took a look at it every now and then. There was no Facebook in those days. But I watched, a little bit here and there. I got a lot of the WWF programming. I did read the wrestling magazines as a kid on and off. And then back in 2013, I had a woman contacted me on Facebook, and she was talking about the Von Erich family. And she thought I was another Steve Goldstein because, it's like the Jewish John Smith. Steve Goldstein is a name. And I said, no, I'm not that Steve Goldstein. And she said, good, because he's an a-hole. But she said, so you know about wrestling, because I corrected a fan on, some Von Erich fans are a little strange. They believe in this Von Erich curse. And they were saying, rest in peace, Kevin. And I think I jumped on the thread and I said, Kevin's alive. He's fine. He's living in Hawaii with his high school sweetheart, got 4 children, 2 in the business. Stop, saying blessings over his grave. He's not dead. And then the woman, Lisa Renee Andrews, said, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, used to go see Kerry and Kevin at the Sportatorium. And could you write a script? I'm a publicist and a music business, she told me. And Lisa kind of presented herself a little differently than she really was. She was a name dropper. And since I'm from Hollywood, lived a lot of years in LA, it's the capital of bullshit, Wade, wherever you go. And I can smell it pretty good. But she was the catalyst moving the project forward. She said, I can get a hold of Kevin Von Erich. I know a lot of people. And I love when people say this, all you have to do is write the script. It's like I'll paint your house for free type stuff. Yeah. I said, look, I'll write it on spec. Writing on spec means I don't get paid up front. Hopefully down the line, we can work a deal. But I register the script in my name. And I never really, the problem with Facebook, and social media in general, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, you meet a lot of people on here, and half of them are worthwhile knowing, and half of them are flakes. And you got to separate the wheat from the chaff. Exactly. So anyways, I never could, when you don't meet anyone face to face, I'm like kind of guy likes to, look you in the eye, shake hands, break bread with you. But this is the age of social media, so we don't always get to do that. She was in Texas. I was in LA. Kevin was in Hawaii, Kevin Von Erich on the compound. But she got a hold of him, so she kept her word. And she told him, we want to write a story. And she said to me, she goes, you want to do a documentary or a feature? I said, there's already been 2 very well-received documentaries done on the Von Erichs. What's the point of a third? I said, I'd like to do a feature because the Von Erich story, I hate to say great story, but, from a writer's perspective, it's a great story. It's a Shakespearean tragedy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I said, no, let's go for the feature. And by this time, Facebook's full of a lot of wrestlers. And some of them are posers, and a lot of them are real. And they like the medium. They like to talk about the old days. And anyways, I had before I met Lisa, I had met Steve Do It To It Cox, who used to wrestle with the Von Erichs. He was a mid-card guy, won a couple of championships, was on TV a lot on World Class, and then UWF, Bill Watts Federation. And Steve and I, totally different politics. That's how we started out arguing. And I don't really like to argue on Facebook because, again, I prefer to argue in person. But, my point is people can agree to disagree. And that's what's wrong with this country right now. People can't agree to disagree anymore.
Exactly.
So Steve was a dyed-in-the-wool, red state, Oklahoma conservative Republican. And, I'm a Jewish liberal from back east who, went to film school. So, we're both stereotypes in our own ways. And, we got along well. And I reached out to him when Lisa, when I wrote, it took me about 5-6 weeks to write the script. And, I didn't completely trust Lisa. So I went to Steve Cox, and Steve hooked us up with Cowboy Johnny Mantell, who was a real mid-card wrestler down in World Class. His brother was Ken Mantell, who was a promoter. So anyways, Johnny was...
relation to Dutch?
No relation as far as I know. Yeah, but Dutch had no. Yeah, I think they spell it with one L and two L's. But funny thing is, Dutch spells his name wrong on Facebook. God knows why that is. But anyways, Johnny Mantell, he wanted to hustle in and say, well, I was there. Okay, everybody was there. Okay, but so anyways, Johnny faded out of the picture because he was full of bullshit, and Steve and I became good friends, and we liked each other. And I said, look, I got this woman. I wrote a script on the Von Erichs. I want you to take a look at it. And, she's reached out to Kevin, but, I want to see what we can do with this. And we were talking and, anyways, the script wasn't going anywhere after Kevin got a hold of it. And, it was fine. The script, they liked the script. It's a good script. I put some time into it, did my research. And anyways, Steve calls me up on the phone one day and goes, well, how come you're not moving along on the script? And I said, money, financing. He goes, money, is that all? I go, yeah, money is that all. He goes, I got these Oklahoma real wrestling fans, multimillionaires in the oil business, down in Tulsa, and they'd be interested in financing this. And Steve and Lisa didn't get along on the few phone conversations because Steve Cox was very clear to me. He said, I don't want anything other than I want a good story, good telling. And I said, well, I want to bring you in, Steve, because, I'm 5'11", 160. If I'm going to start casting real wrestlers, I need a big guy like you who knows the business and can talk to these people. So Lisa came off to him wrong. She said to him one time, what do you want? And it was insulting. And Steve came back to me and said, told you didn't want anything. I said, I know, and I believe you, but, we're dealing with Lisa. And a lot of this was because she was a woman in a male-oriented field, and everybody else is bursting with testosterone, and she's not. So Steve said, I'll set up financing for you, like 20 to 25 million financing. So anyways, these millionaires, and I knew they would do this because I've been in Hollywood a long time. First question they had for Steve, because they were interested in the project, they said, do we need Steve and Lisa? And Steve, because Cox they were going to bring in. Everybody's named Steve in my stories, by the way. It gets a little confusing. But Steve, who's a stand-up guy, and he's my brother from another mother, said, look, we need Steve. You don't really need Lisa. You need Steve because he's the writer and he's a good guy. But Lisa got the ball going, and Steve will keep her in check. And because, Lisa, it was a little shady about her. She was wearing different color wigs. I mean, I couldn't verify her stories. I'm trying to figure if I'm getting conned here. But no, I always say Lisa was it's like a football game. She was pushing the chains forward all the time, but she never knew where the goalpost was. She was going to bring in all her friends. And I said, look, Lisa, we're dealing with $25 million financing here. We're not going to bring all your friends into the project. And, but the Tulsa oil people said, look, Steve and Lisa will be the executive producers. Steve's the writer. They'll get a night, and everybody make money. And then Lisa did something she shouldn't have done. She started trying to promote some shows with Kevin's kids. And to her credit, she got them on TNA on a Slammiversary show and Ross and Marshall. And, they were new at the time, but they had the Von Erich name. And Then I get stories that she's promoting some shows outside of TNA down at, there's a place called the Rodeo in Texas that's an arena, and I heard she was pocketing money. And, people were coming back to me with that. And, we're doing everything through private messages and phone calls, and everybody kind of says the same thing. Steve, you're a good guy. You're a good writer. She's a bitch. But I said, and I would say, look, she's a woman. It's a male-oriented field. Give her a little leeway here. I'll be responsible for her, okay? And I told Lisa, look, you're burning a lot of bridges here. I said, you're putting $200 in your pocket at a live show, and you're going to jeopardize a $25 million movie? I mean, what are you, crazy? I mean, it's a couple $100, but, money was tight, I guess, with her. So long story short, it was, let me see, I talked to her, like, I remember, because it was a day, it was the same day Kennedy got assassinated, obviously a later year. It was her birthday. Talked to her at a show, and I said, everything okay? Because she had disappeared for a while. And this is where the story gets real, strange and sad. She said, I'm fine. I got a text message. And next thing I know, she disappears completely off the face of the earth. Nobody knows where she is. They find her 3 weeks later. There was an anonymous tip, anonymous phone call. Don't know who made it. She was found in the trunk of a car, dead. It was her son's Mustang in a seedy hotel on the wrong side of Dallas. Nobody really knows what happened. But Steve Cox and I have put together that she probably owed maybe the cartel some money or something, or she was dealing with some bad people. And all I can say, Wade, is I hope she didn't know what hit her. I hope she didn't know it was coming. So right away, everybody comes to me and go, well, Steve, you know what happened, Steve? I go, no, I don't know what. I know as much as you do. I had a reporter from I heard a reporter in Dallas called me, and he says, we want to do a story on Lisa Renee Andrews. I said, look, she's dead. We're not going to drag her name through the mud. I said, if Dallas PD calls me, of course, I'll talk to Dallas PD. I have a friend in Texas who's I don't know if you know Jerry Yoakum, if that name sounds familiar at all. He worked with the Von Erichs. He has a brother who's a Texas Ranger, and he said, look, Steve, it's an unsolved murder case. They don't know who did it. I said, anybody need to talk to me? They said, no, nobody needs to talk to you because you don't know anything. You're in California. So that's the story of Lee. But then at that point, it fell apart because everybody pulled back. The millionaires pulled back. Kevin pulled back. And Kevin's kind of a strange guy to deal with. He's had a lot of concussions in his life, 35 in the ring. He was the high flyer. And, he forgets a lot of things, but sometimes he snaps right into it. It's like a little strange. But he's paranoid because years ago, Bob Gucciano, who used to be the Penthouse producer, wrote like a piece on the Von Erichs, and it was a real hatchet job. So Kevin doesn't trust anybody. Kevin's a real religious guy. So probably if you're not a born-again Christian, like a guy named Goldstein, he has his guard up. But, the script is registered to me. I have an entertainment attorney in Beverly Hills who has it. He likes it. He's kind of another one of these closet wrestling fans. And hopefully we will get it made. Now, my only thing was, I wanted to make it with Kevin, but, as my entertainment attorney said to me, it's public domain. You can make it without Kevin, and I said, look, I know that'll upset a lot of his, Von Erich fans are kind of like Deadhead fans. They're, and anyways, I opened up a Facebook page when we got this going for the movie, juiced it up to 52,000 people. 52,000 people on a Facebook page. Now, obviously, half of them are probably already built in just on the name on Von Erichs, but the other half I got. Right. Yeah. So that's kind of, it's still floating around in Hollywood right now. I send Kevin a happy birthday message, text him every year. He's still trying to get his kids never made it big. They had a tryout in Nexus. I think Vince McMahon didn't do anything with them. They should be able to wrestle well. I've never seen them live, but they've been trained by, going back to their grandfather, Fritz Von Erich. They're doing like some coastal, some shows in Oklahoma and Texas. No television exposure. They had that, Lisa got them that TNA Slammiversary thing, but nothing ever came of it. It's just when you deal with the Von Erichs, because so many bad things have happened, they're real weary, Wade, of new people, of strangers, especially not from their neck of the woods. Yeah. But, and then when Lisa got murdered, that set everything back. But you know what? It got me, it kind of got me labeled as this wrestling historian because I know a lot about the business, and and also Steve introduced me to a lot of people, and they find me. And like I mentioned to you before, Rocky Johnson got a hold of me before he died, wanted to turn his script into his book into a script. But then Rocky passed away, and I figured that would have been a nice pipeline to Dwayne Johnson. But then I asked myself, if Rocky wants to make a film out of his book, why isn't he talking to Dwayne?
Yeah.
So yeah, you know what it is? Wrestlers work the audience, but after a while they work each other. So, and then after a while, I don't think they know the difference between what's a work and what's real. Some of them just believe, what they're smelling. And that's why I enjoy watching Young Rock, which I'm going to see tonight, because that's actually a nice little look into what the wrestling business is really like. And it's probably true of his strange relationship with Rocky, his father. Then they patch things up. But, as Steve Cox told me, when you're a wrestler, you're in the ring 15 minutes a night, and the other 23 hours, 45 minutes, you're on your own free time. That's when you get into trouble. You can handle the ring, but when you're outside the ring, the drugs, the women, the police, all that stuff happens. And, so there's a lot of death. I always say it's like the music industry, Wade. There's a lot of death in the business. They die young, suicide, steroid. And then a lot of them are religious, but that happens after all the bad stuff. They find religion. And those that survive, they're decent folk. Their politics are a little more conservative than mine for the most part. But, I like them. They're good people, and they're entertainers, and they all want to turn their life story into a movie, which not every wrestler has a great life story to turn into a movie. The Von Erichs do.
Yeah. The Von Erichs, man, I mean, for anybody that doesn't know their whole family dynamic, it's really tragic, really sad. It's almost, and I think I've heard you make this comparison in other podcasts, but they're like the Kennedys of wrestling.
Right.
I mean, absolutely. Every bad thing that could happen to them has happened. I mean, like multiple suicides. What was the one that got sick or something overseas?
That was David Von Erich, but you know what? That could have been something. Yeah, they say it was a parasitic infection, could have been drugs, but there were 3 suicides in 6 years. Kerry, first Mike, then Kerry, and then the little guy, Chris, who was kind of the runt of the litter. And that was sad because he wanted to be big and strong like his brothers, and they put him in these novelty matches with like Percy Pringle and stuff.
Yeah. I was, when I was coming up, I wasn't, young to appreciate the sportatorium and the Von Erichs and the Freebirds and stuff like that. That was just a tad before my time. Now I went back and I've watched all that since then, but I remember when I was really getting into wrestling, I remember Kerry Von Erich as Texas Tornado.
That was when he went to the WWE and Vince just totally erased his history.
Yeah. And that's what I learned when I would go back when I got older and started going back and looking at some of the past stuff. I was like, oh, well, that's Texas Tornado. And I was like, well, actually it's Kerry Von Erich. And then Vince changed his name. But I mean, those matches that they used to have with the Freebirds and then one of them had with Flair. I mean, those were some wrestling dudes, man. I mean, Fritz he knew how to breed him down there as far as wrestling goes, for sure.
Fritz Von Erich was, he really was ahead of his time. He wanted to, at the time, you had the big 3, the WWF, NWA, and AWA, and he was part of the NWA world class. But he broke free of NWA, which of course that ruffled some feathers, but he had enough talent and ingenuity and a vision he would have been a big 4 wrestling federation, maybe. You never know. What if David was going to be the next world heavyweight champion? They were grooming him, the NWA, to beat Ric Flair. I mean, Ric Flair was going to give him the belt. And those matches with Harley Race in Missouri over the Missouri State title were usually a stepping stone to that. And then David died in '84. And that's when everything shifted, the paradigm. He died, and then Fritz had to push Kerry in, and Kerry did become NWA World Heavyweight Champion for 3 weeks. And the reason it was only 3 weeks was because Kerry, as nice as Kerry was, give you the shirt off his back, the story goes, he was unreliable. And the reason Ric Flair has stayed on top for so long, and even in his 70s, he still gets a paycheck, is because Rick would wrestle 6-7 nights a week. That's what the champ has to do. Got to wrestle 6-7 nights a week in different towns, and you can't be late. And Kerry couldn't be that kind of a person. David Von Erich was really going to be, he was like Fritz. He had a mind for the business, the angles, the booking. He would book David. Kerry wasn't interested in that. Kerry was a bodybuilder. He had a lot of skill in the ring. He was a good looking, big, muscular guy. I once said to Kevin, I said, I know David was kind of the heir apparent to the throne, and Kerry ended up there. I said, Kevin was actually the oldest one in the family. He was the first, well, except the oldest one was electrocuted at 6 years old. So that's, that Jack Atkinson Jr. So maybe the curse is the curse. And Kevin said, look, he said, I dated my high school sweetheart, Pam. I married her. He goes, I didn't want to be on the road 6-7 nights a week. I wanted to go home to my family. So he goes, I was happy with the titles I got. And Kevin won his titles, never the World Heavyweight Championship. But he goes, I was happy winning my tag team titles, my state titles. And he goes, I didn't want that. He goes, David wanted that. And then David died. And he goes, and Kerry wanted that, but Kerry didn't accept the responsibility that went along with it. And, and then it got to like Mike. Mike was probably pushed in too early. Mike was the next brother. And probably the worst thing that happened to Mike Von Erich was his debut match. He went to a 10-minute draw with Ric Flair on television when Rick was the NWA champ. And, Mike, now Kevin swears Mike was a great athlete, and people don't give him his due, but Mike was a lot skinnier than the rest of them, and he was starting out. He kind of looked like Opie from Mayberry, the old Andy Griffith show. And, and then Mike goes to Japan on a tour, gets toxic shock syndrome, which most of us thought only women get. And I actually know the doctor and his wife who saved Mike at the time. But then Mike comes home and drives his car into a lamppost. He gets into legal problems. Then he ends up overdosing on alcohol and drugs. When you look at the history, there were 6 sons. The oldest is electrocuted at 6 years old. Okay, he's not part of the wrestling business, but still, that's a shock. At the time, Fritz was wrestling for Stu Hart, Bret Hart's father, federation out of Canada. So Fritz comes home and he goes, I can't be on the road. I got to start my own business in Texas wrestling, which is what he did. And he's grooming David to take the title because, David was an interesting guy because he's, number one, he's 6'7", David. He's got red hair. He's technically skilled in the ring. And he also enjoys the behind the scenes, setting the angles for the wrestlers, booking. And then David in Japan, dies on a tour. And then Kerry gets pushed probably a little too soon. And as I think we talked previously, he lost half his right foot in a motorcycle accident. And he
had no idea as a kid. I had no idea he did that.
Yeah, and you know what? They kept it a secret, and he used to shower with his boots on, in the locker room. Now, that would send up some red flags right there. Why are you showering with your boots on?
Thanks, man.
Yeah. But, Kerry was pushed in real fast. They gave it to him for 3 weeks. And Kerry was probably the most photogenic of the Von Erichs. So that's why Vince gobbled him up with the Texas Tornado shtick. But then Kerry's push ended. He won the Intercontinental title from Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, and he lost it back to him. And that's when Kerry knew that he wasn't going to be, his push was over. And he was going to, not be a jobber, but he wasn't going to be a man. He was going to be a mid-card guy. Yeah. And, Kevin really despises Vince McMahon, even though he worked for him. Him and Michael Hayes used to introduce some things on demand TV. But Kevin said, look, he gave Kerry just enough women and drugs to keep Kerry happy. But so he kind of blames, because Kerry needed help. He got hooked on painkillers because he really probably shouldn't have been wrestling with half a foot. And eventually you're selling the painkillers, and eventually you end up getting arrested. And he was going to go to jail. Now, it was probably going to be minimum security for maybe a year or so in Texas, where he'd be a local celebrity. But his wife was going to divorce him. And Kerry just put a shotgun to his chest, and that was the end of Kerry, which had happened. So Mike committed suicide first, then Kerry. And then the youngest one, Chris Von Erich, who just never got above 5'7", 140 pounds. He tried to live up to it, but I think he shot himself also. So that's 5 brothers dead, at least 3 by verified suicide. David, maybe it was a parasitic infection, and then the youngest one electrocuted. So Kevin was the last surviving member. No girls in that family. They were all boys.
Definitely tragic. And just looking back through, like, when I was coming up, mid early 80s, there's so many guys that have passed on now. I think I tagged you in that video a couple weeks ago. I posted. I remember that from the Pile Driver VHS that I bought. My mom bought that for me, and it was all the music videos that Vince had all the wrestlers singing. Well,
Yeah.
that song, if you only knew, you only knew what I'm going to do to you. And all these guys are singing. He's got the whole roster up there singing. And as that camera's panning back and forth, I'm like, well, God, well, he's dead. King Kong Bundy's dead. Butch Reed is dead. Macho Man is dead. Miss Elizabeth is dead. I mean, it's really tragic to look back and see all the people that I really grew up on that have now, passed away. It's
before their time.
Way before their time.
I mean, it was like in the Von Erichs, it wasn't World Class had a nice group, as I call them, the non-Erichs. You had Gentleman Chris Adams, one of my favorites. Bruiser Brody was a legend in this business. The handsome half-breed, Gino Hernandez. They all died, either drugs or murder.
Yeah.
It's, and so at the end, Fritz sold World Class to the Jarretts, Jerry Jarrett, Jeff's father. And they tried to merge that. They tried to have a Tennessee-Texas rivalry, but Jerry's on my page. The Jarretts, and I know a lot of people don't like the Jarretts for whatever reasons. There's always a lot of jealousy, but the Jarretts are still alive. I mean, they may not be legendary like the Von Erichs, but Jeff had a great career, stuck around. He was, for a little guy, amazing. He's not that big, Jeff Jarrett. I never watched his father, Jerry, but Jerry had a career. But Jerry got into the matchmaking and the booking. So some of them are smart enough. Jerry Lawler's been around in spite of the fact he likes to date young girls, really young girls. But, they all have their stories. But, I just think of all the suicides and the deaths and stuff. And it is sad. And I can understand why a guy like Kevin Von Erich, is weary of people. But, Lisa Renee Andrews, my old partner on the film, she got close to him. And, I just said, Lisa, it's not hero worship. I just wanted to keep it professional. I said, I admire the family. Kevin happened to be my favorite Von Erich brother anyways in the ring. I thought he had a lot of skill. He was the high flyer. But I said, keep it business, and the ones who survive, they keep it business, or they have a strong personal life or faith in God or whatever. But you can't get wrapped up in the craziness, because you got groupies everywhere. You got a lot of women throwing themselves at your feet. Kerry took advantage of that a lot, and there's Steve Cox told me some crazy stories about wrestlers, in the hotel rooms behind the scenes. And Steve had his issues with drugs too, in the 90s. He married his wife, brought him back from all that. And he finished out his career in Japan, which he thought was great. He made money over there, learned a new culture. But, he goes, yeah, drugs messed me up too for a while. They mess up a lot of people in this business.
They do. And I mean, to speak of someone that's been through all that and still managed to persevere. I know he had a scare maybe about a year ago, but I mean, Flair, by all accounts, anybody that I've talked to that knew Ric Flair personally said he lived the gimmick he portrayed on TV. He would drink, he would, do whatever with the women. He would womanize. I mean, he was limousine riding, jet flying. That was him. He wasn't telling you a story. And I mean, he's still kicking to be as old as he is.
Well, you know what? Flair likes to marry a lot of women. At least he marries them, right? He's separated from the last one. He probably, Flair drank and Flair womanized, but I never heard too many drug stories, although there probably were a few. But the thing is, Flair was a consummate professional. He was never late. And, he was always there for the show because he enjoyed being the champ. And Flair had that rare ability that a lot of these guys can't do to make their opponent look good in the ring. Yeah. And that's an art in itself, because some guys won't job for other people. I mean, the great Mexican luchador, Mil Mascaras, the joke about him is like, Mil won't job for anybody, even if he's 76 years old, and he still occasionally wrestles. But, at some point, you're a star in the business. But at some point, if you want to continue in the business, you start being, as they used to call it, jobber. Now it's enhancement talent. But I've seen that happen to the greats. I mean, I grew up watching Chief Jay Strongbow in the WWF, and he was winning all the time. But at the end of his career, he was jobbing to Greg the Hammer Valentine because Greg was 20 years younger. And it's just father time shifts you over. But you can still work in this business if you're reliable. and you've made your friends, and you do what the matchmakers tell you to do. That's why a guy like Bruiser Brody, as great as Bruiser Brody was, you never knew what he was going to do. And there's that classic story of him and Lex Luger that you probably know about there. And
oh yeah, when Lex just completely left the damn ring, didn't he? He thought Bruiser was going to kill him.
oh yeah, Lex had, and Lex was supposed to win that match, but Bruiser all of a sudden decided to flip the script. And and Lex was a bodybuilder, played some USF football, and I'm sure he was trained how to wrestle. But Bruiser was a legitimate tough guy who was 6'8" and 300 pounds. And you never knew what Bruiser was going to do. And that's why Bruiser was in the WWF real briefly, but he had a problem with Gorilla Monsoon, who was matchmaking at that time. And, they said, we can never have this guy back because he won't do what we tell him to do. I mean, look, the way the wrestling match works, we never say fake. We say pre-scripted, choreographed. But the two things that are predetermined is the winner and the loser and how long the match goes, because we got so many matches on the card. But but everything that happens in between is kind of improvised if you're really good. So you never know if somebody is following the script like Bruiser Brody, or if they're just shooting, which is, when they do things for real. And the business is legendary with some real shooters who would settle some grudges in the ring. Like Bruiser Brody probably didn't like this kid Lex Luger getting pushed, or maybe Lex insulted him in some way in Bruiser's mind. But, Jack Briscoe was a real shooter. He used to take it out in the ring on a few people. Sometimes you get away with it. Sometimes you don't. The Von Erichs could all shoot because Fritz told them, he taught them how to snap legs and ankles and stuff. But, but they usually followed the script. And, when they were in world class, look, the Von Erichs and the Freebirds, everyone thinks they hated each other. They didn't hate each other. Okay, they were all making big money. That was the best rivalry in wrestling. It was gold.
Oh, they packed houses, man. I mean, that was just like, that was the epitome of a rivalry, or whatever you want to call it. That was, that was it. That was like almost my original rivalry. There was those guys.
There was no 6-man tag team titles before the Freebirds and the Von Erichs. It was all tag teams. I mean, they revolutionized it, and they still call it the Freebird rules. Like the New Day in the WWE, it's like they'll still the announcement. Oh, Freebird rules. Any 2 out of 3 can wrestle in the ring, and the third guy can run interference outside. But it was like, because Buddy Roberts was happy being part of the Freebirds because, he was the run to the litter. But the joke is nobody took a beating in the ring like Buddy, and everybody knew that he could sell it. And, so you got
Jerry was the muscle on that for sure. And Michael Hayes, who I won't say was maybe the best in-ring talent I ever seen, but he could cut a promo.
Oh yeah, he was on the mic. He was gold. So they all complemented each other's skills.
Yes.
I mean, Michael and Buddy by themselves weren't going to be big and strong enough till you put a bruiser like Terry Bam Bam Gordy in there. So they all, and Terry was dead at 41. That's another one who died early. Mm-hmm. But Michael survived. Michael's working for Vince, Doc Hendricks, whatever his name is now.
A long time too.
Oh yeah, so Michael has learned. Well, Michael's been around the business a long time, and he, he lived the life too. But and he looks kind of old when you see pictures real close up of him. Yeah. But Steve Cox used to joke and say, "Look at me and Michael Hayes." He goes, "Hayes is actually a year younger than me. Looks old enough to be my father sometimes." But well, because actually Steve Cox and Michael Hayes, they won a title together, and Steve said they used to call me the fourth Freebird. I said, "Steve, wasn't that Jimmy Garvin, the fourth Freebird?" He goes, "Okay, I was the fifth Freebird."
And that's something that I think is often when people say, like, give me your Mount Rushmore wrestling. That's hard. Because to me, you kind of have different levels of that. You have somebody that can draw money like Hogan. Hogan drew a ton of money.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody's ever going to confuse Hogan with being the best in-ring wrestler.
No.
He only had 3 moves. He just knew how to use them and when to use them.
There you go. The leg drop.
And like you said, Ric Flair could have a match with anybody. I mean, there's that old saying, you can wrestle a broom and make the broom look good.
Yeah.
Ric Flair could do that. He
can
get
do
a broom
that.
over. And there's different levels to that. Who is the greatest? You got to classify the greatest in what? The greatest in back in a house, the greatest in ring ability. There's different levels. I hate when people ask that question and don't give you kind of a direction, because that's such a loaded question.
And usually you can tell by the answer how old the person is, because Because look, if you really, because I may not name you four, but I know two people who are going to be out on the floor on Mount Rushmore. You got to put Lou Thez in there and Bruno Sammartino.
Yeah.
And if you start telling me names like Sting, I go, yeah, okay, yeah, you must. What do you like 20 now? Yeah, something. No, I mean you gotta. But most, a lot of today's audience has no idea who Lou Thez was. And I would say look him up. And if you really want to go way back, look up Frank Gotch and Karl Gotch, because these guys, they wrestled when it was real. A guy like Frank Gotch, who, but there's a history that goes back a few hundred years. And yes, Sting is. I always say there are wrestlers and there are performers. And Ric Flair is a great performer. And you know the Ric Flair Bob Backlund story?
No.
Well, what happened was when Flair was the NWA champion and Backlund was the WWF champion, they're going to have one of those rare matches, interfederation. So, Bob goes down to Flair's territory. Now, Bob Backlund was a college wrestler. He was a big guy, big. I know he looked kind of like Howdy Doody, but he was like 6'4", Bob, and he wasn't muscular, but he was, he was a good sized guy, right. And he could actually wrestle. He was trained that way. Flair is a great performer, so Backlund goes down there and to Charlottesville or North Carolina or whatever, and he calls Vince up. He goes, "There's something wrong here, Vince. Like, there's nobody here to meet me. What's going on?" And anyways, he got a little upset, Bob. And Ric Flair found out about that when things were mended fences. And he said to, and Rick will probably deny it, but there are witnesses. He begged Bob not to hurt him in the ring. He goes, "Look, Bob, I don't know what the deal was with the NWA. Nobody's trying to pull a fast one on you, but we're going to put on an exhibition." And those matches usually ended in draws because you're not going to win the other federation's title. But Ric Flair was genuinely scared that Bob Backlund was pissed and was going to kick his ass. And Bob said, no, don't worry about it, Rick. He goes, "We're just going to put on a good show for the fans." And that's the difference between a real wrestler, Bob Backlund, and a performer, Ric Flair. Ric Flair's had Bob Backlund, as great a career as Bob Backlund's had, and it's a great career. Ric Flair, many consider him, I always say he's the greatest wrestling performer of all time, Ric Flair. He's not the greatest wrestler of all time, but he's probably the best performer. And, and I always thought Rick could make other people look good. Bob, it's funny. I watch a lot of Bob Backlund's matches, and I always remember the opponents, even though Bob won. Don Morocco, Jimmy Superfly Snuka, Bob could make them look good too. And a lot of guys, and that's what will really keep you working in the business, because the fans, they have to feel you have a chance of losing. Even though Bruno held the title for 7.5 years straight, lost it, then had it for another 4 years. When he lost the title the first time to Ivan Koloff, I was a little kid listening to it on the radio or something. I was shocked. I couldn't believe the great Bruno Sammartino had lost a match. You get invested in that stuff. And I always say my biggest, but those guys, and being on the mic is half the business. Absolutely. The great guys on the mic, and I don't see there are still a few guys who can cut a great promo, but Bob Backlund, Dusty Rhodes, Roddy Piper, these guys were gold on the mic. And nowadays, it's I'm trying to think of a champion at the moment that I really enjoy, on the mic, like a guy like Paul Heyman. Yeah. He manages first Brock Lesnar, now Roman Reigns. Those two guys aren't good on the mic, and maybe they'll get better.
That's why they got Paul, because they're not good on the mic.
He's the mouthpiece. Yeah. I remember when The Rock started out as a baby face, Rocky Maivia, everybody booed, and he had no heat, no nothing. And then all of a sudden he cocks that eyebrow, turns heel, turns into Rudy Toot and everything, and it takes off for him. So sometimes they hit their stride a little bit later on in the game. It's like anything else. You learn and you can do it. I never thought when I first saw Rocky Maivia that he was going to turn into the Hollywood's #1 box office star. And you know what? He's very good. I've seen him do drama. I've seen him do comedy. Yeah. I've seen him do action. Rocky Johnson, or not Rocky, that's the father, Dwayne Johnson is terrific, at what he does. And he'll probably be back in the ring once in a while. But, Vince will pay him to come back to do something. But yeah, Dwayne's not going back into the ring full time ever, because he makes way too much money, and it's a lot safer business, doing what he's doing now. And he just turned 50 last week. So it's, I'd
probably put The Rock as probably the best cross platform actor / wrestler I know he's not really wrestling currently at the moment, but for a while when he was still doing movies, he was still active in the ring. And I mean, as a kid growing up, when I seen Hulk Hogan in the movies, I was all like, oh my God, it's Hulk Hogan. I got to go see the movie.
Yeah.
As an adult, now I realize how cheesy and awful the movies were, like Suburban Commando and Mr. Nanny and shit like that. No Holds Barred wasn't really that bad because it still had centered around that wrestling gimmick. So he didn't have to actually play like a different style person. He almost kind of had to play a version of himself.
Well, Hulk Hogan always plays Hulk Hogan. That's pretty, I mean, probably the best movie Hulk Hogan was ever in was the first Rocky, and it wasn't a big part, but that propelled him to where he is. Before The Rock came along, Roddy Piper was the only one to really transition successfully.
Yeah.
Now, Steve Austin, Stone Cold Steve Austin has tried. I mean, he does movies, but he's never really, hit it big in the movies. Like everybody wants to be like The Rock, and guys like Ric Flair, they never went into the movies.
Cena hasn't done too bad. Cena's got a good number of movies up under his belt.
Yeah, we're talking about Steve. No, Steve does, but he's
John Cena.
Oh, John. Now you know what? I'm a big John Cena mark. Okay, number one, he's from my neck of the woods. He's from Massachusetts. Yeah, I like John Cena a lot. In fact, I'm always involved in that. Who is better, John Cena or Randy Orton? I'm not a Randy Orton fan. Okay, I mean, I appreciate his career, but it just never did it for me. John Cena. I think my prediction is he's doing a lot of movies. I think John Cena will be very big in the movies. Okay, I thought he had a nice acting style when he was wrestling too. Cut good promos. If I was going to pick and he's doing movies. I haven't seen the latest Fast and Furious one where he's the heel and the bad guy in that one.
Not too bad.
But he gets good reviews. He's got a strange look. He's got kind of like a Fred Flintstone look there.
Yeah.
But I would say Cena could be the next the Rock type person, although maybe there is only one Dwayne Johnson. But I'm a big Cena fan. I know a lot of people. I always say to people when they criticize John Cena was that generation's Hulk Hogan. First it was Hulk Hogan. 20 years later, we had John Cena. Yeah. Half the people hated Hogan because he was so successful. Half the people hate John Cena for the exact same reason. It's like jealousy is an ugly thing, Wade. Okay. Just appreciate what Cena's done. I am a big Cena fan. Totally. Yeah. When you mentioned his name, I could talk about Cena all the time. I'm a big fan of his.
And he even does well in the comedic roles that he's been in too. I forgot the name of the movie. It escapes me, but it's like this couple went on vacation somewhere overseas and they see him and his girlfriend and they just like become these friends that just won't leave him alone.
Right. I forget the name too. Yeah.
That's the name of it. It's hilarious.
He can do the same thing Dwayne Johnson does. He can do comedy or action. Right. And a lot of some of the guys who have, is Steve Austin can't really do comedy. He can do comedy in the ring, but he can't really do comedy in a movie.
Right.
And now, comedy. Yeah. Now, Roddy Piper, he had a lot of directive. I mean, everybody, the classic John Carpenter's They Live with Roddy. I was a big Piper fan. It's just, but until The Rock came along, but now everybody thinks they can do that. But yeah, if I was going to pick the next guy who can make, multi-million-dollar movies, I'd say John Cena. I can't see Randy Orton doing that. I know they always do. What's that sequel they do? The soldier, the GI,
the Marine.
The Marine. They've had everybody play that, right? Orton, the Ted DiBiase Jr.
Yeah, Ted DiBiase Jr. done that. Randy Orton done it. One thing I'll say about Randy in the ring, whenever I watch him right now, currently, and I don't watch a ton of it right now, as is, the current landscape of stuff. But whenever I do, the one thing I'll give Randy props on, and I know he's had his, detractors over the years for things outside of the ring, but he is just smooth in that ring. He makes everything look effortlessly. Better than everybody else. I mean, he's
well, he's a third generation wrestler. Not just Cowboy Bob, his dad, but Bob Orton Sr. He is, and he is smooth in the ring and everything. I just I've never appreciated the acting side of the mic side of what he does. But but you know what? That's just a preference thing, And I always say that's why I don't down Randy Orton. And you know what? He's still kicking it. 42 years old. He's still mainlining headlining events in WWE. So obviously he's playing the game. I thought they were going to have him start losing to younger talent, but he's holding his own, still, he could literally, he could become world heavyweight champion again. Probably not, because they're going to push some younger people. But they give him the tag team title with Matt Riddle, and I know everybody hates Matt Riddle, you know. But no, he's on every week, Randy Orton. I said, this guy's working, which means he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's
Right.
he's a model employee. If Vince says win, you win. If Vince says lose, you lose. If Vince says tag team with Matt Riddle, I know it looks weird, but you know, do it anyways. We'll give you the titles. He goes, fine. And yeah, I'm sure Randy would like some movies too, but besides the Marine 6 or 5 or whatever number it is.
They're hiring Jason, I think, at this point. Friday.
Be like Super Bowl with Roman numerals, huh?
I mean, going back to Flair for a minute, like the promos that he cut back in the day are so legendary and still prevalent today. See, the way I see things is guys now are still basically feeding off all that, like Floyd Mayweather, the boxer. You know, in the beginning, he was Pretty Boy Floyd, and he was kind of split with the crowd. I almost think Pretty Boy Floyd was kind of how Rocky Maivia was when he first come in. And then when Floyd went Floyd Money Mayweather, heel, you either hated him or you loved him.
Yeah.
The people that loved him were going to pay and buy his fights because they loved him. The people that hated him were going to buy the fights because they wanted to see him lose.
Yeah.
And either way, you're getting 100% of the people buying your fights. All that to me was stolen and borrowed and modeled from Ric Flair and how he used to do it, the flaunting money. I'm going here. I'm flying here. I've got rings. I've got watches. I've got suits. I've got women. I mean, all that was stolen and reproduced and cut up so many more times. Now, Steve Austin done it a little different and The Rock done it a little different, but that's probably 3 of the best talkers on the mic right there in my whole
Absolutely.
life of wrestling.
And when you're that good, you can play it as a heel, and then you can turn baby face for a while, go back to heel. The switch, that's something that's really kind of lost in today's wrestling. And I asked Steve Cox about that. I said, look, when I watch wrestling, I mean, I know it's choreographed. I know it's pre-scripted, so you can only watch so many minutes of going back and forth, and you can kind of figure, okay, who's going to win, because you know the way who's being pushed. But I said, what I really enjoyed when I was a kid was when a heel turned babyface in the middle of a match or on the mic, or the reverse, babyface turns heel. He goes, yeah, the reason, and Steve Cox always called them the boy band wrestlers. They look good, they're muscular, they're pretty boys. They don't have the acting chops. I mean, a guy like Dusty Rhodes, who was, let's say not in shape, he could wrestle. A 300-pound guy could wrestle, but he was great on the mic. They gave him the NWA World Heavyweight Championship 3 times, Dusty Rhodes, but he would usually lose it to Flair, and get it back or whatever. It's just they don't have the acting chops. And that's why when I watch wrestling today, they're all, most of them are very technically proficient. I see things in the ring that you didn't see 20, 30, 40 years ago. Some things I wonder, how do you do that without getting hurt? Sometimes they do get hurt, but it's probably tougher for them to be good on the mic, and that's you're telling a guy who's been an athlete all their life, like you pull out of football or another profession, and you're saying now you're going to be an actor. And being from Hollywood, I know that's not as easy as they may think it sounds. And that's why you have to be a natural, like a guy like Dwayne Johnson. I was surprised how he, but I didn't see it in him until he turned heel. Then once he turned heel on the show, I said, okay, this guy's got acting chops. And obviously Hollywood saw that too in him. And, but then there's guys like Ric Flair or Dusty Rhodes that never had a film career at all. And you kind of wonder if that was by choice or just the way life worked out. Nobody wanted you.
Yeah. What about Kurt Angle was another one that, come in as the babyface Olympian and then kind of made that switch to heel. And I liked him better as a heel. I think he might have had a movie or 2 up under his belt, but
Kurt Angle's one of my favorite guys. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Wade. He works better as a heel. Yeah. And this guy, he's probably and you know what? Kurt Angle should do more movies, because he used to crack me up when he was a heel on those promos he was cutting.
The milk stuff that he would do is I laugh more looking back at some of those things. I'll see him on Facebook and they'll have those throwback interviews with him. Man, he had me dying. I mean, just he was good. He was really good at comedy too.
He was funny because he always played it as kind of like a dipshit heel, like was a, yeah, and it was a great little promo, guy he was. You got to create a character. The best ones create a character, and if the character is strong enough, you can play it as a baby face or a heel with a little tweaking there. And but the worst thing is when they come out, sometimes they just give them the wrong gimmicks. I have seen, like, you and I have probably seen some of the worst gimmicks, that you say, what were they thinking, the writers, when they did that?
Yeah, some awful ones in my day for sure.
Oh yeah, it's just, and sometimes you get a bad gimmick as punishment. Like Dusty Rhodes got that yellow polka dot costume because he kissed off Vince McMahon, but he kissed Vince's ass and he worked regular. But yeah, that was what was it? There was just somebody else I was reading. Yeah, you get punished for these things. Like when Adrian Adonis, if you remember him, wonderful technical wrestler. When he put on a lot of weight, Vince McMahon got pissed off and he said, "We're going to turn you into adorable Adrian Adonis with the whole effeminate thing." Now, that was punishment, but Adrian did it, and unfortunately he died in that car crash in the water. But yeah, Tony Atlas. I don't know if
that gimmick though, just tell you the truth. I mean, that was almost like pre-Goldust stuff that he was doing there. He was working that gimmick.
Dustin Rhodes, with his legacy and everything, the most success he ever had was his Goldust. I
remember as a kid, that was like, I was probably more into wrestling at any point in time when Goldust come in, and I was just remember like even sitting there like, what the hell is up with this dude?
And Dustin,
they wouldn't say that. They wouldn't say any words to describe that. It was androgynous, I think. Was
androgynous. It was sexually ambivalent. And Dustin's like a big old country macho guy and everything. I think that's why they had his wife bring him to the ring, just to let people know, like, hey, he's straight. I remember when Billy and Chuck, Billy Gunn and the other guy, Chuck Palumbo, they were supposed to be lovers or whatever. And then, something. Well, nowadays you can't even do those gimmicks anymore. It's a lot because everybody's so politically correct now. So
I remember the Piper, him and Piper in the backlot brawl. I think it was WrestleMania 12. I think that was the Iron Man match between Bret and Shawn. But they had that backlot brawl, which I didn't know, I think was actually filmed at a different time. It didn't go on live as how it was put on. But when they got to the ring and Piper basically like stripped off his gold suit, he was wearing like lingerie on.
I remember that. Oh, yeah. No, it was just, and nowadays, if you did something like that, everybody's up in arms. It was like wrestling is the most, if you look at wrestling, just through a microscope, it's like the most offensive thing around. Started out with Nazi villains and Russian villains, and then you went to the sexual things and the Attitude Era, and it's just like, it's not real. It's a put on, everybody. Just lighten up a little bit. Nobody lightens up. I mean, I'm a comedian. I do comedy. I'm very angry at what happens to guys like Chris Rock and what happened to Dave Chappelle out at the Hollywood Bowl. You don't like a joke, don't buy a ticket. Get up and walk out. You can't hit the comedian. It's a joke. I mean, guy like Don Rickles would have been killed today if he was still alive.
What's your take on like Shawn Michaels? Because when I was coming up, I remember looking at Shawn. That was the first guy that I ever stood back, didn't look at the character, but started looking at the in-ring ability. When I was young, Hogan was a character. He was the immortal Hulk Hogan. I didn't realize at that time that this guy's really not very good in the ring. I just looked at, the character. Probably Shawn Michaels was my first guy where I looked at what he did in the ring. And I'll tell you the exact pay-per-view that it switched for me was like, this guy's like really good, was when he got put into the Survivor Series against Bret Hart and the Family, which I think is where Owen made his turn to go against Bret. And the King was supposed to be in that pay-per-view, but as you alluded to earlier, he kind of had some let's say court discretions involving some young ladies. We won't get into that here, but Shawn was kind of put in there at the last minute, and it was like the way they wrote it was none of them beat him. I don't know if you remember that match, but he never got pinned. He fought and fought and fought, eliminated Owen, and then finally just left and was like, the hell with it, and he left. He never got beat. And going out, it's kind of like what you said to me. He was a heel, but by the time he left, I became a fan.
And I kind of feel the same way because I actually remember when Shawn, I don't when he actually started in World Class in Fritz's thing. He was just he was an opening wrestler, you know, and he had the long blonde hair, and he did he wasn't there very long because he was trained by Jose Lothario and actually ran a wrestling school with him. And Sean, so I saw some Texas matches with the Von Erichs. He didn't go anywhere with that. When I first saw Sean take off was in the old AWA with Marty Jannetty when they were the Midnight Rockers. And for some reason, I was a big Jannetty fan, although Jannetty's burned so many bridges and he's kind of a, we all know about Marty's stories here. It's like, I killed someone, I didn't kill someone. It was just a joke on Facebook. But so I watched it, and then they moved into the WWF as they, from the Midnight Rockers to the Rockers. And I still wasn't a big Shawn Michaels fan. I was still rooting for Jannetty, all the time. And then Shawn really progressed. Shawn had, number one, Shawn had skills. And he was a good looking guy, which was important, the Heartbreak Kid. And a lot of people in the business, if they speak bad about Shawn, it's because they're jealous. He was Vince McMahon's brown noser, as they say. He did what Vince wanted him to do, but look what he got in return. I mean, could you ask for a more successful career for a guy that wasn't that big? Okay, I don't know how big I don't even know if he's 6 feet tall, Shawn Michaels. Can't be much more than that. He's what we would call a little guy in wrestling. But and in the beginning, I said, how's he going to beat these big guys? And then you watch the way the matches are scripted, and he held it. It was believable. I think Bret Hart always had problems with guys like Shawn Michaels because they were roughly the same size, but Bret could break your arms and legs for real. I mean, Stu Hart puts you get through the dungeon. You're a real wrestler there. But I became a Shawn. He grew on me, Shawn, over the years, and by the end, I was a big Shawn Michaels fan. Heel, face, didn't matter. I just because the guy had a lot of heat. He had a lot of charisma in the ring, and it's a great career. I don't know what he's doing right now, Shawn. I mean, he's another guy found religion.
I think he's still toying something with NXT, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's got something to do with NXT, I believe.
Yeah, no, Shawn, sometimes you like these guys the first time you see them. Like I'm a big Macho Man Randy Savage fan, okay? Sometimes the first time you see him, you go, I like this guy. And I didn't even know about Randy's whole career before he came to WWF at the time.
A baseball player for a while. Good one.
Oh, yeah, and then, you research his brother and his father and everything. But, he's a guy you like first time out. But guys like Shawn Michaels, they grow on you, and you really start to appreciate what they do. And by the end of their careers, you say, this guy's a legend. He does, you don't talk, I know they toss the term around loosely, but Shawn did everything he was supposed to do. But Shawn was smart. Once he got to the WWF, then the WWE, he stayed there because he knew he didn't go to NWA to wrestle Ric Flair. He had his niche, and it worked out well for Shawn. So I know he's had his back issues, but hopefully he's in better health these days.
Now, I remember when he turned on that episode, it was the barbershop, I think it was, and he kicked Marty Jannetty through that window.
Oh,
I remember for it being the time of that was a big deal, at my age at the time. But I remember Bobby Heenan's commentary on there when he did that, and he said, look at that coward Marty Jannetty trying to dive through the window. And Bobby Heenan, man, was like,
Bobby was great.
He was gold.
He's on my list of top 3 managers of all time. I'm a fan of the old Captain Lou Albano, but Bobby's right up there.
No, and his commentary is absolute gold. I'll watch some of those old Royal Rumbles and stuff just to hear him talk.
Well, it's funny because I think the best announcing team was Bobby and Gorilla Monsoon.
Absolutely, I do too.
And when I was a little kid, I remember the other Gorilla Monsoon, who was a fearsome 400-pound Manchurian giant. He was, he would wrestle Bruno, then he would never get the title. And by the end of his career, Gorilla has turned into he was a big wig at WWF. They had the Gorilla Circle behind there. That's where Bruno, you did what Gorilla said, but Gorilla turned into this real lovable guy, but he used to scare the crap out of you back when he first started out, all black tights and everything, and 400 pounds. At the end, he's the baby face announcer, and Heenan's the heel announcer, but they were great together. It was just comic gold on the mic.
Oh, yeah, you couldn't ask for better, man, back then. And I wish I was probably a little bit older to appreciate some of that stuff that I heard, but just them talking, man, going back and forth was classic. He was like, down in one guy in the ring, he's talking about, why don't you go up there, Brain, see what you got? He's like, I need it here. I got to stay here. I mean, just he was just so good, man. And of course, my heyday growing up on the mic was Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross, which is another great,
Yeah.
tandem. But I'd have to put them second up against Gorilla and Bobby for sure.
Oh yeah,
Such
they
a
and
sad ending for Bobby too, by the way. Real sad how he went out.
it is sad when you see how he looked at the end and everything. It's bad. I don't remember when Bobby actually started out as like a wrestler who always lost in the old AWA and stuff, but he found his niche as a manager. And the same way Lou Albano, sometimes these mediocre wrestlers become great managers. Like Lou Albano, who he really took off with the Rock and Wrestling connection with Hulk Hogan. Bruno Sammartino is the one that said, look, Lou, you're not much in the ring, but you're great on the mic. And next thing you know, Lou is, the manager of all these champions. He's a guy who had like some success. He crossed over into like the other media, movie and film. And, Cyndi Lauper was his friend and everything. Yeah. And I remember Lou back in the old days, he was calling everybody. He was saying, Bruno, that Italian, Albano, same Italian. It was like people bought it though, and, but you can't do that anymore. You can't make fun of anybody's ethnicity.
Right.
And I understand, look, racism is bad, but this is a joke. Whenever Lou Albano did something like that, you weren't supposed to cheer him. You're supposed to boo him. Nowadays, you gotta be afraid to say anything on there. But
there's no way that the Attitude Era, which is kind of what I grew up in, I was in high school along with DX, Stone Cold, Rock, NWO is the shirt I'm wearing now. I was in high school when all that was real popular. So every kid around my high school either had an NWO shirt or was trying to put the diamond cutter on somebody or the stunner or something like that. But those storylines, then you can't do that now. I mean, like you said, you had Shawn Michaels and Triple H sitting in there playing strip poker in the middle of the ring. And I mean, the blood that they had in that first Hell in a Cell, which I think Kane made his debut there, and beat the Undertaker. Shawn had so much blood in that ring, like when he come out, it was just like a puddle under him.
Yeah,
you and they dare be able to do that now.
AEW does a little blood now. Obviously it's not real, not like Abdullah the Bill. In the old days they used to, if you cut the top of your forehead with a razor blade, it'll bleed. The sweat will bleed. But then they went to it's unsanitary, so they do the plastic squibs like in Hollywood. But yeah, I mean, you really see any blood in the ring because it's frowned upon by, it's too bad. I mean, look, there's a lot of, I taught high school in LA for a while and actually for a good while. And I had some kids who believed it was real, and I said, kid, it's not real. Of course it's real. I said, kid, you can't hit somebody over the head 20 times with a steel chair and then they bounce up and hit you over the head with a steel chair. Life does not work that way, and I'm saying, what am I arguing with this kid for? Let him think it's real. Okay.
Yeah. I used to have those debates and my thing was like, look, I know it's not real, but you can't sit here and say that I'm wrong for enjoying this when you're going to go put on and watch Rambo and watch him kill 47 people with one gun and never reload.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
It is.
Wrestling is a movie, but it's not a movie that ends. It's a soap opera.
I always say wrestling, it's soap opera. It's like theater. I said, you go to the theater, you see Macbeth. Yeah. The actor playing Macbeth doesn't really die in the last scene, right? It's a show. I mean, it's the same thing with the movies. Rambo didn't kill anybody in real life. It's called in what we call it in Hollywood and in script writing. It's a suspension of disbelief. For 2 hours, you go into a movie theater. It's a suspension of disbelief. You escape from whatever's bothering you, and you get wrapped up in the story. And if it's successful enough, it'll be a franchise and sequels and all all that. But you can't walk out and think this stuff is like real, kid. It's entertainment.
And when you can get as a writer, when you can cross that line to where people go, okay, is this real? Is it fake? Is it a work? That's when you strike gold. Because I remember like one of those times, Terry Funk had just come back, and I think it was a Clash of Champions or something like that, and he put a plastic bag around Ric Flair's head.
Yeah.
And tied it. And like it was like Ric Flair just passed out and died in the middle of the ring. And I remember reading later on, like that was so people were complaining and there was controversy on it. But as a kid, I watched it. I'm like, damn, did he just kill Ric Flair?
Yeah.
And then another one that was kind of similar was when the Undertaker put Ultimate Warrior in the casket on the funeral parlor segment. Shut it. You got all these people out here. As a kid, I was like, did he really do it? Now I look back, and they're out there with these sledgehammers and they're like barely tapping it. So I can see it's a work and see how it's done. But when you can draw that line to where people don't know, okay, is this real? Are they really doing that? That's when you know you've done your job as the writer.
Absolutely. And that's the, so you're not cheating anybody, you're not lying. This is what I always say, this is acting, this is make believe. Now I always say wrestling is like half sports, half entertainment, as Vince McMahon said. We're not a sport, we're sport entertainment. The problem now is when you watch the news, it's not the news now, it's news entertainment. That's not good for anybody. But because we're not supposed to, the news, we should know it's real. Wrestling, look, when I was a kid, I was watching it. I'm sitting there. I remember the first time, I'm like maybe 8 years old, and I'm watching the old WWF, and I didn't know what it was. My dad wasn't a wrestling fan. I mean, I just was flipping through the TV, and I find it, and Bruno and Gorilla and Victor Rivera, my all-time favorite wrestler, and you don't know what, because I saw boxing when I was a kid, and I knew that was real. And although sometimes you wonder if wrestling's more real than boxing these days too.
Yeah.
So, but if boxing, there's nothing. That's why you can't bet on professional wrestling. Okay, you can bet on a boxing match in Vegas. You can't bet on wrestling. I mean, that should tell you all you need to know right there. But to a 12-year-old kid, they don't understand that.
It's interesting you mentioned that, though. I do remember at one time you could bet on whether the Undertaker's streak was going to end on WrestleMania.
Right. You can bet you can get like the same way you bet in football who's going to score the first points or the over. Yeah, you can do that, but okay, you can bet on when the streak ends, but it's but it's a different. There is nothing like professional wrestling as far as I know. It's kind of
something up there. If somebody knows if they got the inside, that's an opportunity for somebody to make a whole lot of money that could bet on sports.
Oh yeah. I think there's a sport that is popular in Florida, highlight. Now I hear those matches are all also pre-scripted and choreographed, but you can bet on them. I mean, I don't know how popular it is outside of Florida, or if it's even still around, but that's not a real sport like tennis or something. It's but there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you pay your money to be entertained. Nobody's pulling and it's like when you go see David Copperfield or Magician or something, he doesn't really make the card disappear into thin air, but it sure as hell looks like that. Okay. That's, some people take everything too literally. It's just, when one day my dad said to me when I was a kid, it's not real. And I was like a little disappointed. But he said, "You want to go to we'll go to the Boston Garden. We'll see some matches. We'll go to a card," which was great. I went to my dad to a few. He wasn't a fan, but he went because he loved me. I was his son, and we went there with my uncle and my cousin. I had a good time, but yeah, he just wanted me to understand it's a little different, than now. 200 years ago, it was real. Guys like Frank Gotch, that stuff was real.
Yeah. That was different, but it's changed so much from those days. And I'll close out on this story here. There's a wrestling convention they do every year, the weekend after Thanksgiving, and it's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. And it's called WrestleCade.
Okay.
And I had seen it advertised, before, and I was just like, God, I'm usually busy. Something that's weekend football. That's usually like Alabama and Auburn. I'm somewhere in Clemson and Carolina, down from where I'm from. That's like our version of the Super Bowl there with those teams because they're from the Palmetto State. But one year I decided, all right, I'm going to go. And my son at the time was just getting into wrestling. So John Cena at that time was his favorite wrestler. Now, guys like that weren't there. It was more or less guys that I grew up on that has long since retired. And man, we went that first year and I had a blast. I seen Eric Bischoff. I seen Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Ricky Steamboat, Ivan Koloff, Road Warrior Animal, Brutus Beefcake, Mick Foley, Jerry Lawler, Ric Flair, Sting. I mean, on and on and on. And the sad part about it is over these years, a lot of these guys, even after we had those pictures, have passed away. Scott Hall recently passed away.
Right.
Ivan Koloff had passed away.
Road Warriors are gone.
Yeah, the Road Warrior Animals are gone. I mean, it's crazy. But being able to meet all those people and kind of telling my son about them, like, okay, well, this guy did this. And, these guys would fight these guys on rafters. Jim Cornette was there. So I would tell him about all the stuff that Jim Cornette used to do, and kind of it was a really good bonding experience. And we went like 3 years in a row, and then COVID happened. So I think they shut it down for 1 year, but they have kicked it back off. And it's just a neat way to kind of go and communicate with some of those guys, see guys from the past. It really kind of just brings back that nostalgia. And then they have the newer guys in the ring and they'll wrestle later on. Some of the old guys will get in there too and wrestle, like George South and stuff like that. But it was just a really cool time, especially for me and my son, to go down together and meet a lot of those guys. Honky Tonk Man was there. It's probably that was one of my favorites growing up, was a Honky Tonk Man.
He was a hell of a performer, the Honky Tonk Man. Yeah, absolutely. Wayne Farris.
Farris, yeah.
Actually, Jerry Lawler's cousin in real life.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. You had your son. I don't know how old your son was, or if he thought it was real. It's like Santa Claus. You don't tell your kid there's no Santa Claus when he's small.
Right. Yeah. No, he was into wrestling deep, man. He had all the figures. And then at that time, I think that the app or the WWE network was just getting popular. So we would watch some of the older wrestlings, like some of the ones that I remember from when I was young. Royal Rumble was like my favorite pay-per-view to watch.
Okay. Royal Rumble was usually a good show. It's great. I remember the only thing my father ever said to me, he goes, look, you can watch wrestling. He goes, but don't put your sister in a headlock and don't think you can do these things. Okay. They're professionals. And that was it, because I'd like to put my sister in a headlock, get a little noogie there,
Well, that's still prevalent now. I mean, my son, he would watch some of these things. He's like, why don't you do the F5 on me, but we'd be in a pool, and I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna handle it in the pool. I don't have to land it on your head or nothing. But
no pile drivers though.
Yeah, no pile. You can't. Undertaker's the only person that can pull off a pile driver.
Yeah, that's another thing that hurt Jannetty's career. He pile drive wrong on somebody and broke their neck. I forget who it was, a preliminary wrestler.
Yeah, from what I remember hearing a documentary about that, where I don't know if he was done something where he was supposed to flip and like go down, but they went down a little bit too far and it broke their neck.
Yeah,
they weren't, I don't think, as trained as they let on. I think it was something along those lines. Or at least
you got to be really trained to do something like that. And some wrestlers have reputations for being stiff in the ring. Nobody wants to wrestle a guy who's stiff in the ring there. And the business is full of guys like Stan Hansen. People don't like to wrestle Stan Hansen because he's stiff in the ring. Now, Stan will tell you it's because he's legally blind and can't see out of one eye. And wrestlers will tell you that's bullshit. He's legally blind, but he was stiff when he could see through two eyes too.
What a tough dude Stan Hansen was.
Yeah.
That was a tough guy.
He was a tough guy, So, hey, this has been
Vader's eye out. You remember that?
Oh, God, yeah. I was you can't, it's not like, but that's why if we ever do another one, I've left a message with my friend Nikita Brezhnikov because we mentioned trying to put the two of us on the show together. I'm still waiting to hear back from him, but the title of his book that he wrote is When It Was Real. It was just, he goes, in those days, we believed that stuff because Nikita had like a rough childhood with a father and everything. He goes, he used to go for escapism to the arena. Then he met the wrestlers. And next thing you know, he's kind of moonlighting as a manager at night while being a police detective during the day. Which was all people wanted to talk to him about once the secret came out. He was afraid he was going to lose his job. No, he wasn't going to lose his job. They just want to hear stories about Ivan Koloff and Nikolai Volkov and the rest of them. Good time.
I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed this conversation, man. It's always fun to go down wrestling memory lane with somebody that knows the business. I can scroll down a few things with a few people. I remember this and this, but somebody that's in depth and knows as much about the business as you do, it's always a pleasure.
Well, it's all entertainment. If you love the entertainment industry, whether it's film, television, professional wrestling, sports, there you go. Wrestling is kind of all 4 in 1 sometimes.
Absolutely. And like we said earlier, I think it's rubbed off on a lot of the other sports. A lot of guys from MMA and, boxing and stuff like that. Conor McGregor steals a lot from to me, Conor McGregor is a version of Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh yeah, I'm a big Conor McGregor fan. Yeah, I don't know what his next move is. I thought he was going to get into wrestling for a while, but
that way. But yeah, I mean, he's just, to me, they borrowed all that stuff from wrestlers. They seen how popular it was that made them, and Conor McGregor just embodied everything that Steve Austin did. I remember he walked into a press conference. He was like an hour late. And he come in and he's like, I'm sorry I'm late, but I just don't give a fuck. I mean,
there you go.
What he wants.
Well, they all borrow. Ric Flair was borrowed from before all our times, Gorgeous George, back in the 40s. Ric Flair borrowed from Gorgeous George. They and even his name, the Nature Boy, was from Buddy Rogers.
Buddy Rogers. Yeah, I mean, everybody borrows stuff, and when you add your own spin to it, you can make it your own. And You know, the guys we've talked about here today done a good job at that. Guys like Flair and, you know, Shawn Michaels and Hogan. I mean, all those guys have, you know, made careers and like we said, still kicking after all these years. They would think Flair and Hogan would have probably been the ones that we were talking about have been passed away, but, you know, they're still going. A lot of those other guys, unfortunately, are no longer with us.
And as they say, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, so it's okay to borrow.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, man, I'm glad you come on. Hopefully we can get together and get Nikita on here and we can do one again later on down the road.
Okay, I will still work on getting a hold of him. Thank you, Wade. I had pleasure being on your show.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Same here. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade. That was Steve, the wrestling historian, Goldie, as he likes to be called. Thank you for tuning in. Tune in next week for an all-new episode of Crime and Entertainment. Steve, we'll see you, my friend.
Later, brother.